Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Chair and Vice Chair of Harlow Council.
Thank you, everybody. We're not going to sit. Sorry, Nick. I'd like to have a minute's silence because of the tragedies we had last weekend. It was a horrendous weekend, and I'd like to think of the 11 people that were killed in the synagogue in Pittsburgh and the Leicester City tragedy with a helicopter crash with Vichy and 2 pilots and the 3 passengers. And I'd like us to have that minute's silence for the families and those 2 cities. Thank you. Thank you. Now you may be seated. Okay, so we'll start tonight's full council. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. From the Labour Group, we have apologies from Councillor Tony Edwards, Councillor Tony Durkin, Councillor Edna Stevens and Councillor Chris Vince.
Chair, could I say Edna's in hospital, so could you send some good wishes for her?
Yeah, we will do that. Thank you. Nick?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Councillor Sherwood Johnson, Councillor Mike Hardware, Councillor Russell Perrin and Councillor Sue Livings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. I believe there are none. So we go on to item 3. The minutes of the last full council, pages 6 to 14, meeting held on the 20th of September. And I'll sign them off. Items 4, communications from the Chair. Now, I wanted to mention 4 places that I've actually been this last few weeks. The first one was the High Sheriff came to Harlow and had a very good trip, praised us and thought Harlow was a fantastic place. We visited the police station and community services were there as well. We had photographs taken. We went to the playhouse for young people that have been involved in the upkeep and the things in the playhouse that they're encouraged to take part in and encouraging other young people to go there and do exactly the same thing. That was very encouraging. On October the 30th we had the civic service. And as you know, those who attended, it was a multicultural service, joining together as a community, and the theme was forgiveness and renewal. And it was a very successful event, and I was extremely pleased with everyone that did the performing and the people we had there as well, so I was very pleased with that. I attended on the 12th of October the Royal British Legion's 60th Naval Birthday event, and it was fantastic being with the veterans, their partners, and we had a fantastic dinner as well, and it was really lovely because they started that event in October 58, and at that time they had 5 naval veterans, but in the year 2000 they had 100, so it is a growing event and it's thoroughly enjoyable. The last one I want to mention is the Newhall Primary Academy and Nursery opening on the 17th of October. Absolutely fantastic building, couldn't be better, and the staff and the children are really dedicated to that place. We did a tour of the buildings, and Debbie Gaylor, the head teacher, she was really wonderful. She's dedicated to the school, the parents, and obviously the children in that school, 44 reception children and 23 nursery. So they're the focus, the foundation of the school, and it'll go from strength to strength, I'm very sure. So that's all I've got from that. But there is tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock at the Pardon Wood Nature Reserve, we're doing a tribute for Darren Balasagri, and it's going to be a hive that's been built on his behalf in his name, and his family are going to be there. And all councillors are very welcome to attend, because it's a very worthwhile thing that we're going to be doing for him, because he served us for such a long time. And Councillor Tony, I believe you've got some words that you'd like to share with us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just that I unfortunately won't be available tomorrow to attend that opening that you referred to in the afternoon. But I just wanted to mention that Darren's contribution to the success of that venture was really fantastic. It was something I used to look forward to when he was with us and we were working together on that. And it's something that is rightly commemorated, I think. And just to thank him for the hard work and the enthusiasm that he injected into that whole project.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Okay, we'll now go on to item 5, petitions from the public. There are none. Item 6, questions from the public. David Fong, I believe you've got a question that you'd like to bring forward.
Yes, right, I'll read it out, please, Chair. Would you agree that a practical measure to build confidence in the Jewish community would be to allow the Holocaust Memorial Day 2019 event to be held in the council chamber, and that all Harlow councillors should endeavour to attend the event, especially as the latest Home Office statistical bulletin showed a 40% rise in religiously motivated hate crime in year 2017/18?
That question is to Councillor Lenishin. Would you like the answer in red, or do you want it read out?
Yes, I'd like it read out, please.
Yes, if that's what the Jewish community would like, yes.
Now, do you have a supplementary question on that question that you raised?
Yes, I do. I'll read it out. The dreadful recent events in Pittsburgh show that with a growing far-right menace across Europe and the world, and a menace which still holds the hatred and destruction of the Jews as a core belief, then I believe, and I hope that the Council believes, that educating the public as to the lessons of the Holocaust remains important, as every new generation needs to learn the lessons.
And your question is?
Will you be prepared to lower council building flags to half-mast on the 27th of January, which is Holocaust Memorial Day, recognising the day the Soviet Red Army liberated the Auschwitz death camp?
Yes, we would.
Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, questions from councillors, item 7, there are none. Now we come on to item 8, and that is the motions from councillors. The first one is the adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which is item A, and that's proposed by Councillor Lenny Shears and seconded by Councillor Andrew Johnson. So Councillor Lenny Shears, would you like to go through this with us?
I will, thank you, Chair. But before I actually move this motion, I'd like to say that I know the previous portfolio holder was going to bring this motion to full council, and I also know that it's something she feels really strongly about. I want to say it's something that I feel strongly about too. And I would like to, take this opportunity to thank Wada for all her work on Harlow Council over the years and all her work for this town. I am both honoured and pleased to move this motion to council. Why? Well, it's not actually rocket science, it's because it's the right thing to do. We have stood for minutes silence this evening following the terrible events in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where a man shot people in a synagogue, people innocently attending their place of worship, murdered in cold blood. And why? Because they were Jewish. Reuters actually printed, on Saturday, the United States awoke to the horrifying news of the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh during Sabbath services. A man armed with an assault rifle with 3 handguns charged into the sanctuary of the Tree of Life temple yelling, "All Jews must die," before spraying bullets indiscriminately on the worshippers, killing 11 and wounding others. It is believed to be the deadliest attack on Jewish people in the history of the United States. Anti-Semitism is on the rise in the UK and around the world. We must recognise it, we must fight back against it. And not just the people that are on the receiving end of it, but all of us. In accepting the full IHRA definition on anti-Semitism, we as a council are saying we stand with our sisters and brothers in the Jewish community. We should not be afraid of the definition of anti-Semitism or the examples shown. We should welcome them. It does not stop us speaking out against Israel in the same way as many of us speak out against other governments when we don't agree with things that are going on. But what we do is we speak about the government, not the people. Harlow is indeed a welcoming and diverse community. Long may that continue. We are a multicultural and multi-faith town. We have a proud tradition of welcoming people here, from those who came to Harlow when it was first built in overcrowded conditions following war, to those who we still welcome today. Racism is abhorrent, and we must ensure that we stand with our Jewish community and other communities as a council, as councillors, as residents of Harlow in condemning racism. Following on from the previous debate in the Chamber at the last full council, it's my hope, and I know, that this motion will be passed unanimously. In adopting the HIRA definition, Harlow Council say to our Jewish community, we recognise the racism you endure and we commit to stand with you in fighting that racism.
Councillor Andrew Johnson, would you like to reserve your right to speak now, or would you?
No.
I'll happily second the motion, Chair, and thank Councillor Shears for her words, which were actually quite moving to me. I didn't know a huge amount about anti-Semitism when I was growing up. I first encountered it after I met and married my wife, who is Jewish. And I've been worried, as has she, by the growing seriousness and number of acts of anti-Semitism that have been happening around this country. In fact, we have a Jewish couple that we're friends with who actively talked about the possibility of leaving the UK in the future for some way safer, given the seriousness of some of the things that have been said and done recently. And that worries me. That's why we should all stand against anti-Semitism. I'm not going to make party political statements because this certainly isn't. In fact, I can say that there have been horrific things said and done by people of all the political parties in this country, and it is the responsibility of us as community leaders to stand up to those people and to point out when they are doing wrong. And I'm glad that this council is coming together to adopt the IHRA draft definition, which took an awful lot of time to write. And when you actually read the examples and the details, you can see just how much thought went into it. This council, as community leaders, stands with our community, and the Jewish community in this town has been long-standing and has always been very welcoming to councillors. So I stand tonight and second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Now I'll open up for debate. Anybody want to speak? Or should we go straight into the... Councillor Shears, do you want to sum up then?
Thank you, and thank you, Andrew, for those words. As I said earlier, I'm really pleased to be bringing this motion. And there isn't really very much else to say. What we all know is that it's the right thing to do, so let's do it.
Thank you. Okay, come to the vote on this. Okay, hands up those who wish to go with the motion. Okay. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, now we go on to item B of the motions. Pensions for women born in the 1950s, proposed again by Councillor Amy Shears and seconded by Mark Kimball.
Okay, again I'm pleased to move this motion in support of women born in the 50s. Many women in the UK are suffering hardship due to the increase in pension age, and most adversely affected are women born in the 1950s. Lots of young couples came to Harlow from London in the 50s and later. In fact, there was a time this town was known as Pram Town. Therefore, it is not surprising that a significant number of women in Harlow were born in the 50s and have been affected by the increase to the state pension age for women due to the 1995 and 2011 Pension Acts. Far too many women were never notified of these changes. They weren't given enough notice. To make other arrangements for their retirement. Women generally take on more caring responsibilities in families and are often lower paid jobs or part-time work. Therefore, many women had less opportunities to make other arrangements for their retirement and relied on the fact that they would get their state pension when they reached 60. The DWP has confirmed that it failed to write to women affected by the 1995 Act until 14 years later in 2009. However, these letters were stopped in 2011 because the government was planning to make further increases. Only women born up to the 5th of April in 1953 were written to in that round of letters. The DWP did start writing to women born after the 6th of April 1953, but in 2012. There are around 3.5 million women affected by these reforms, and many are suffering financial hardship. There is evidence that some women have no choice but to sell homes, claim housing benefit and other benefits, some having to use food banks. We are speaking of women in their 60s who have worked, paid their national insurance and taxes, contributed to society, brought up families while holding down jobs. Many working from the age of 15, all women who were promised a pension at 60. IFS analysis funded by Joseph Rowntree Foundation and the Economic and Social Research Council said the falls in household incomes caused by the reform have pushed income poverty among 60 to 62-year-old women up sharply. But this motion is not about equality of pension age with men. This is about gender inequality in relation to poverty and the lack of notice to prepare millions of women who were not given enough warning of the increase in their pensionable age. There needs to be a fair transitional arrangements for women born in the 50s. Many councils across the country have shown their support for fair transitional state pension arrangements for 1950s women. Harlow Council should do the same.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin, would you like to reserve the vote? Okay. Hold it out to debate now. Councillor.
Chair, I want to start this debate by saying I believe that people who have worked hard all their lives deserve security in their retirement. The triple lock the government introduced to the basic state pension rises by inflation earnings and the 2.5% guarantee, whichever is highest. This means that in the 2018-19 state pension provision, people can see that their pensioners rise up to £1,450 more a year than it was in 2010. So we are on the side of pensioners in this party. For those reaching state pension age after April 2016, the new state pension has been introduced at a single flat rate of £159.55 per week, which has also been given the triple lock guarantee. All those women affected by the 2011 state pension age changes will draw their state pension under the new system, which is much fairer to women than the previous system, and will mean 650,000 women will receive an average of £8 per week more in their first 10 years. Equalising the state pension age was necessary to ensure the state pension remained sustainable and to reflect our modern economy and our society. The Pension Act of 1995 legislated for this to be done gradually after 2010. But following sharp increases in life expectancy projections, the government had to accelerate this process slightly in the Pension Act of 2011 to secure the sustainability of the system. The government did listen to the concerns raised at the time of the 2011 adjustment, and as a result, the maximum increase was capped at 18 months relative to the 1995 timetable. Now, that represented a £1.1 billion concession, helping those women affected with the transition to the higher state pension age. Making further transitional arrangements will not only complicate the system, but could also cost taxpayers many billions of pounds, and the potential cost of reversing the 2011 changes has been estimated in excess of £77 billion by 2020. Now tonight, the Labour Party are playing politics with women in this town who are concerned about this issue. One of the fundamental questions they need to answer tonight is why their shadow chancellor hasn't factored into his public spending plans the £77 billion that it would cost to make these changes. Why haven't you said that tonight? Since 1995, the Department for Work and Pensions has gone to significant lengths to communicate the changes to the state pension age, including campaigns and writing directly to those affected. Higher life expectancy does mean that as a society we have to adjust to slightly longer working lives. But it is the right of everyone to ensure at the same time that they have security and dignity in retirement. And that is what this government is ensuring. That is why the government will continue to provide support for people in later life, including the triple lock and maintaining the universal benefits such as the winter fuel payment. I think the government recognises the challenges associated with the state pension age and is carefully navigating these issues. DWP ministers are working hard to ensure such decisions are fair to all generations of taxpayers and people entering retirement. I have to say I'm furious about this motion. Chair, it's factually incorrect. It doesn't recognise the challenges that we face as a country, and it's only the Conservatives that are grappling with these sensitive issues to make sure that there is equalisation of the state pension age. And the Labour Party themselves nationally, and I expect Mark Ingle to answer this question, will not factor into their public spending plans a reversal of it. So what are they? Are they for the equalisation or are they not? Over to you.
Councillor Maynard.
We're not talking about the triple lock. We're not talking about the amount of money they're going to receive. We're not even talking about a modern society. All we're talking about is women were promised a retirement age, and that has changed. They've reneged on a deal, and now the government need to reassess this policy. What's that, Councillor Charles? Can you speak up?
Get your facts right.
Councillors, one at a time, please. Thank you.
I really did enjoy that party political broadcast by Councillor Charles earlier. We're not talking about a matter of right. We are talking about a matter of right and wrong. Okay? Joel, you can carry on all night.
Where are the facts?
Right, councillors, come on.
Thank you very much. This policy is just wrong. It is reneging on a promise that was made to many women. I hope the government goes back and reconsiders it. I will be in support of this motion.
That's Councillor Carter. Okay, any more debate on this? Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. On the face of it, this motion looks pretty reasonable. And to any member of the public that isn't a politician and isn't involved in politics, it seems perfectly reasonable. And frankly, if the Labour administration want to do something that they know their MP has already been doing, Rob has already held meetings with senior ministers, he's already made representations on behalf of ladies affected by this. If they want to do the same and want to seek the Secretary of State to reconsider the transition arrangements, they're more than welcome to do it. I'm quite happy for them to do that. That's their right. But I think we need to look at some facts. This has been coming since 1995. Okay? People talk about not being very well informed about this. I've got a mother of a certain age, and she has friends of a certain age, and obviously for reasons of tact, I won't go into her detailed age. But I've known this has been coming. I'm not affected by it. I'm a man, obviously. I've known this has been coming since 1995 because it was big news in 1995. It's been big news since, and every lady of a certain age has known it's been coming for those years. So this should not be a surprise to anyone. Secondly, I hate to point out, but between 1997 and 2010, the Labour Party were in government.
Yeah.
So this was passed in 1995, and then they had 13 years in government. And guess what they chose to do, Chair, about this?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay? They were quite happy for the situation to continue. They knew it was coming. Okay? So it's not been a surprise. The Labour government had 13 years to deal with it if they wanted to change it, and they didn't. And then currently, the Labour Party did put in their manifesto some weaselly words before the election about seeking other ways to deal with pension age. But they have currently and consistently refused to budget the 77 million in their costs. Even in the alternative versions of the budget, they've refused to put the 77 billion back in. So until the Labour Party nationally tell us where 77 billion pounds, okay? That's up to 2020. Until the Labour Party tell us where they're going to get this money from, where they're going to find more money from their magic money tree, until they tell us that, it's no, not ours. We know where ours is. You've got yours as well. Until they tell us where they're going to get the money from, it is ridiculous of them to come here and ask us to do something, or ask my government to do something that they're not willing to pay for themselves. So they've known it's coming, they've had a chance to change it and they chose not to. They're refusing to put money aside to do something themselves or tell us where they would get the money from. So really, this motion that appears perfectly reasonable and logical is virtue signalling, it's hot air, and it's party political campaigning in by-election season. That's all this is. This is the Labour Party making party political statements and scaring women of a certain age, because that's what the Labour Party in Hollow do. They try and scare people all the time. In fact, they've scared some of their own councillors away. So, Chair, I apologise, Chair. We have a situation where this has been on the books for years. This has been not changed by the Labour Party when they were in government, and they're asking for something that they would refuse to pay for themselves. It's a cynical motion, but if they want to write to the Secretary of State, perfectly happy to let them.
Councillor Danvers.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, but if you want the facts, 1995, the women's retirement age was to be increased between 2010 and 2020 from 60 to 65. And every 2 years, it was to go up a year. They've leapfrogged to 67. People I know who are actually planning to retire at 60 are actually working on now because of the actual way in which things go, all the way up to 67. And to deprive lots and lots of women nationally of that expectation, you can actually fiddle the figures as much as you like over there, but at the end of the day, once you start changing the ball game, the unfairness creeps in, then people cannot plan for this. And in fact, obviously, the Labour Party would find, I'm very unclear whether you're saying 77 billion or 77 million. Half the time it's billion and half the time it's million. So, you know, if anybody can get their facts right, let's start with that.
Point of personal explanation, Madam Chairman, understanding orders. Yeah, I apologise if I misled Councillor Danvers in 77 million. I clearly meant 77 billion, and I take on board that I may have misspoken. It was 77 billion, Councillor Danvers.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring into the room the real life story of Councey, and I asked if I could use her name because she wants to be in this room. She lives in Seymours. When we moved here 12 years ago, she answered an ad to come and look after our children. She's looked after them for the last 12 years. I've watched her scrape by, cleaning. I've watched her lose jobs without any warning because the elderly man she was looking after died. I've watched her with her 3 children struggle to bring them up to look after their children now because they are struggling. She is 60 next week, and she told me tonight that she thought she would be getting something that would look after her next week. She thought she was going to be cared for next week. That's what the pension meant to her. And as she said to me, and I wrote down some of the things she said, everything we touch and buy has got tax on it. I paid £60 in tax last week alone. She said, how can they say we haven't paid our way? They came after teenage mums, they came after immigrants, they came after disabled people, and now they're coming after old ladies. Who's going to be next? Babies? That's what she said to me. Now, I'll tell you, she's not a Labour supporter, far from it. If there's nothing we agree less on, it's politics. But she is someone who is, I guess, the term is collateral damage. And sadly, you know, I think that those people...
Let other people speak, please. That's
Councillor Charles.
No, Councillor Charles, it's not your turn. It's Councillor Hardy's.
Chair, inflammatory language against any council.
You're doing the same thing back. It's respect for me as well. Thank you. Can we please carry on? Thank you.
Sorry, I'd just like to say I find it disrespectful to be spoken over while I'm speaking.
Get used to it because we've had to from your side.
Okay, I'm going to get in here. I don't want any councillor from either side coming against the other councillor when they're speaking, because that's disrespectful to the council, the councillors and the chair. Thank you.
I really just wanted to finish and say I've never stood up and spoken before, and I'm really shocked that I was spoken over when I was telling you the testimony of a woman who I asked permission to use her name in this chamber. Her name is Councey. She lives in Seymours, and I don't see that there is anything disrespectful in the story I've brought to this chamber tonight.
We will now carry on. Councillor Ingram.
Chair, slight increase in the length of working lives. People have to accept a slight increase in the length of working lives, according to Councillor Charles. Some women had only 2 years' notice of a 6-year increase in their state pension age. A slight increase in their working lives. Councillor Johnson says this looks reasonable. It does. It is reasonable. There is nothing wrong with asking a government minister to review a policy which is causing hardship. Let me give you some examples. And I have permission to use these. Maud is a woman born in the 1950s. She says it's quite a long speech. These are Maud's words. The government has stolen money that is rightfully ours, and it didn't even tell us until it was far too late for most of us to make plans. I've yet to meet anyone who is in receipt of a letter from the Department of Work and Pensions setting out the government's intentions. Some women in stressful jobs took early retirement, fully believing they could manage until their pension kicked in at 60. And suddenly, they find they have to wait an extra 6 years. And there are women out there who are still aware of the changes. It was all pushed through without fuss, and with the general attitude of, what are a bunch of old women going to do about it anyway? Peggy said, Peggy's of a similar age, I worked all my life and brought up 3 children, yet here I am, aged 64, tidying up my CV when I should be helping out with looking after my grandchildren. It makes me livid. I resent that I have been robbed of my retirement plans. I'm having to take in a lodger to help pay the bills. Who the hell is this government to turn my life upside down like that? I have paid my contributions. We had a contract that we would go to work and pay him and retire at 60. And now the government has stolen what is rightfully ours, and it thinks it can just get away with it. Chair, presumably Peggy was brushing up her CV because Guy Oppenheim, the Tory Minister for Pensions and Financial Inclusion, suggested women in their 60s who are facing poverty or retirement should train to become apprentices. Elizabeth, 63, a food bank volunteer for the past 6 years, says she's noticed more women in their 60s seeking help. Women in their 60s who should have retired using food banks to get by. In the last year, said Elizabeth, I've given out food to more women around my age. The food bank is only supposed to be short-term crisis help. But these women need help for years. Now look, it is reasonable to ask the Secretary of State, as this motion does, to review the transitional arrangements for these women. It is reasonable for her to accept the mistake that has been made, that is causing real hardship to women across the country and in Harlow who feel that their contract of working has been broken. I'll be supporting the motion.
Councillors. Okay, Councillor Shears, can you sum up, please?
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. So, playing party politics. I would say that the party politics have come from the opposition tonight. We was not playing party politics with women's lives in this town, or any women's lives. That is not what this motion is about. I quite clearly said what this motion is about, and so that you are clear, I will read it once again. This motion is not about equality of pension age with men. This is about gender inequality in relation to poverty. And we have heard stories of women that are living in poverty tonight. And the lack of notice to prepare millions of women, they were not given enough warning in the increase of their pension age. And it may well have been in some newspapers, it may well have been, but not everybody has seen it. And we know that for a fact, because the person that Councillor Harvey just spoke of told us quite clearly that she did not know. So what we are asking for is transitional arrangements for women affected. We are not asking for the retirement age to return to 60. That is not what this motion is saying. This motion is saying transitional arrangements. And I move this motion, and I hope that we pass it in this chamber tonight.
Chair, I call this to be a named vote.
Thank you, members. I will call your name, and I would ask you to simply say for, against, or abstain. Okay, so everyone understands the motion. You're saying either for, against, or abstain. David Carter.
Abstain.
Simon Carter.
Abstain.
Joel Charles.
Abstain.
Nick Churchill.
Abstain.
Jean Clark. Mike Danvers.
4.
Bob Davis.
4.
Mike Garnett.
Abstain.
Tony Hall.
Abstain.
Eugenie Harvey.
4.
Maggie Holcoop.
4.
Mark Ingle.
4.
Andrew Johnson.
Abstain.
Eddie Johnson.
Abstain.
Stephen Mullard.
4.
Danny Purton.
4.
Lainey Shears.
4.
Clive Suter.
Abstain.
John Strachan.
4.
Emma Toll.
4.
Phil Waite.
4.
And Mark Wilkinson.
4.
Thank you. Chairman, the recorded vote is 4, 13, abstentions 9. The motion is carried.
Okay, so the motion is carried. We now go on to item of the motions, item C, the committee development. This is proposed by Councillor Mark Ingle and seconded by Councillor John Stratton.
Chair, before I begin, I'd like to thank the officers and the scrutiny committee who prepared such a detailed report that has been the basis of this motion, which I shall be drawing on quite heavily tonight. Changes to legislation in May 2013 allowed for the conversion of offices to residential accommodation through what is known as permitted development. Harlow has a significantly higher number than many other areas in Essex of these developments, such as Redstone House, Templefields House, Terminus House, Greenwood House, and many others. These developments have been used primarily to house single people or families with children who are presented as homeless, and where there has been a duty to rehouse them under homelessness legislation, homeless prevention duties, or as a result of welfare reforms. Officers have been able to identify in excess of 1,000 units of accommodation within the council boundaries that have resulted from office to residential conversions under these permitted development rights. For Harlow, that produces a number of challenges. Unplanned for and increased pressure on local services, such as general practitioners, health visitors, hospitals, children and family hubs, family solutions, police, social care, education, and the voluntary sector. In fact, pretty much every aspect of our community. But let's be clear, it's the people being moved in are not the problem. It's the policy. In fact, the people being moved into these conversions are victims. The report says the negative impact on families placed out of area can be huge. This is particularly true for children and young people because they're removed from familiar surroundings, extended family and friends. And their education is often interrupted, which may go on to result in children not fulfilling their true academic potential. They may also be exposed to antisocial behaviour and criminal behaviour, which has been reported to have taken place at some of the sites. Adults are also affected because they're removed from their usual support networks. The report goes on. The majority of conversion sites in Harlow are within industrial areas, and whilst accommodation can be of acceptable quality, there are significant concerns about the appropriateness of placing families with children in such locations. For example, the lack of easy access to public transport, distance to schools, health service, etc., etc. It's resulted in a high volume of calls to Essex Police. An unknown male brandishing a knife in full view of children. Suspected drug dealing and drug use. The misuse of alcohol by residents. And I could go on and on. This motion asks the Council to take all steps possible working with government, working with other councils, and I personally have already approached a number of other council leaders who are using the accommodation in this town to ask them about how they're going to help us deal with those problems. And take whatever steps we can to ameliorate the problems caused by this legislation. I accept that the legislation was perhaps was well intentioned. However, the unintended consequences have been hugely damaging to this town, and we must seek to do what we can to stop it.
I believe that Councillor Carty, you've got an amendment for this motion.
I do indeed, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Councillor Strachan, do you reserve your right to...
I reserved it.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair. Again.
I wish to move an amendment to this motion. The amendment was shared with the proposer yesterday and colleagues are on the table before you. The motion covers the issues extremely well, plus what Councillor Ingle has just said, with which we are in total agreement, including the thanks to the Scrutiny Committee and their staff for the excellent report, impressive though it was. The purpose of the amendment is to sharpen the objectives and support the letter recently forwarded by Robert Halford MP to the Secretary of State for Communities, Housing and Local Government, so that we are all agreed on what needs doing. As we've heard, the quality of life of people living in some of these conversions falls a long way short of what was envisaged in the Gibbons Master Plan. The appalling conditions for children with no play areas, long distances to school and so on, demand that something needs to be done now. The unexpected strain which a thousand unplanned homes and families puts on our local services is unacceptable, and a far better system with enforceable protocols is required. The distortion to our local plan is untenable. How are these unplanned properties treated against a number of new homes required each year? What impact, if any, do they have on the housing numbers on the draft local plan? Madam Chair, it's a mess. In his speech on Monday, the Chancellor of the Exchequer made reference to permitted developments, and he said, the government will consult on planning measures to support high streets to evolve. As part of this, it will consult on creating a more flexible and responsive change of use regime with new permitted development rights that make it easier to establish new mixed-use business models on the high street. It's interesting that he referred only to the high street, which suggests that offices in employment areas should not have been included in the amended regulation. So we need to make our case as soon as possible and get it on the government's agenda. I do hope we can work together on alleviating this blight on the lives of our residents and our local services. I move.
Councillor Johnson, you second this. Do you want to reserve your right to speak?
Please,
okay.
that's okay.
We now debate this amendment. Councillor Danvers.
So I can't support the amendment, surprisingly, if it's associated with the name of our MP. Because if you actually look at the Parliament's Hansard, you will find in 2016, as the Housing and Planning Bill was going through, at every single stage, somebody called Robert Halford, who seems to now have changed his tune, was actually in those lobbies voting for it every time. Backed by a government in 2013, when the directives were first introduced by Eric Pickles, who said he believed in localism, actually incorporated into law in 2016. There are possibilities of exceptions, and not surprisingly, when this was first voiced by Pickles, somebody called Boris Johnson, as the Mayor of London, went to the government and asked for an exemption. Where was the exemption? Which was given? The City of London. they can't actually deal with this in the City of London, but people in Harlow have to actually deal with this. People in many areas where there's deprived communities, they actually are sending people out of London. In fact, when I went to the leaders' meeting on behalf of Mark only the other month, all of the Essex leaders were condemnatory of this policy and condemned many of the London boroughs in actually following this particular policy. It's been there for a long time. I'm not prepared to actually see somebody who's actually been a proponent of a policy suddenly being presented by the opposition party as somebody who's now against it. I know he does this a lot of the time, but at the end of the day, to me, it's quite unacceptable to actually put it into a resolution.
Any more councillors in the debate? Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. You know, sometimes I can't believe Councillor Danvers, Chair. He obviously, yeah, thanks Councillor Burton, and that's exactly what we're talking about being talked over, you disgusting individual.
Can we please come to order? Thank you very much.
Sorry, I do apologise, Chair. You did say it was disgusting to talk over each other, and that's me what I was agreeing with. So, Councillor Danvers talks about our MP being in voting lobbies, and he obviously doesn't understand how parliamentary bills are processed and how they're voted for. This particular part of the permitted development rights gave rise to an unintended consequence. And the leader of the council, and to be fair to him, he raised this with myself and my deputy the very first time we met, and we did offer the chance to work with him on blighting this, and him and I have spoken about this since, about the blight that this has caused on our town, the problems that this has caused for our town. And I do honestly believe, Chair, it's the unintended consequences of the bill. The permitted development rights were there to make sure that in big cities, in big industrial cities up north, where there were large numbers of industrial units, ex-industrial units laying vacant, they could be used quickly for housing. And it seemed to make sense, and it made sense to me at the time as well. I never realised the logical end game of that in Harlow, with some of these places that are so far out of the way being used in this way. And I do agree it has caused problems and concerns. And like Councillor Carter has said, we'll be supporting this motion tonight, regardless of what the party politics of those opposite about throwing out an amendment that's useful and helpful just because it bears the name of the MP. Wow, how childish. These permitted developments have caused problems, and what we've seen is, as the leader has said, we've seen people being effectively dumped by London boroughs in areas that don't have any community, that don't have access to shops, that don't have access to any decency. And often, unfortunately, these individuals are the most complex of needs, the most complex of cases. And that brings with itself a real problem for our town, for our social services, for our police force, for our housing officials. It brings a whole number of problems. And again, I think that was the unintended consequences of the bill. So I'm not going to slag off any of the MPs that voted for this bill at the time. And there were members in various voting lobbies from both sides during the bill. I've looked at the as well. And I don't think it's right to say, just wholesale, the whole bill was wrong because of one small unintended consequences, as serious as that unintended consequence may be. So I know, and the leader knows, that Rob has been making representations on this. I've always said to him that we will be supportive on this issue because I think this loophole needs closing. I think it needs closing. And I do thank as well the scrutiny committee. Councillor Carter spent a great deal of time on that scrutiny committee. And that's why I think he was best placed to come up with some of these amendments. And others too, but I'm saying that's why I think he was best placed to come up with some amendments to this, to make the motion that we're going to pass tonight, hopefully, more enforceable and more helpful. But we've heard what the Labour Party wants to do tonight. They don't want to support it just because it's got Robert's name on it. Again, have a suspicion that might be more to do with elections and by-elections and things like that than anything else, or just pettiness. It's clear that they're going to vote our amendment down. That's fine if that's what you choose to do, but I understand why you're doing it, and it's petty. That won't stop me from asking my group to support the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Ingle.
Chair, this amendment indicates the council's opposite support the thrust of our motion, and we welcome that support. Thank you. Our MP's letter on this issue to the Minister concerned indicates that he sees the harm this piece of Tory legislation is causing. It's a shame he didn't speak up about it when it was being introduced. Nonetheless, we welcome his change of heart and his support for the work this Labour Council is doing. However, we do not accept the amendment, and not for petty reasons. Let me explain. The detailed actions suggested in the amendment, numbered 1, 2, 3 and 4, in our belief, are covered in the general terms of the motion. And councillors opposite can be assured we will be exploring all of those options and more. We don't wish to have the scope of the work as council does limited by this. As for working with Robert Halfon, I'm happy to work with anybody, even Mr Halfon, if it benefits the residents of Harlow. Councillors opposite will know that I've met with Mr Halfon, and we have plans to meet again to discuss further areas of cooperation. But I don't expect him to name-check me in the House of Commons for this, and I'm rather surprised that the councillors opposite want to tie Mr Halfon's name to a motion in this council criticising the effects of Tory legislation that he did nothing to oppose when he went through Parliament. Thank you, Chief Wilson.
Okay, I think we'll now come to the vote on this amendment. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? Okay, we now... Abstentions? No. Okay, so that this amendment is not carried. So we now go back to the substantive motion. Councillor Mark Wilkins.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. In speaking to the substantive motion, which does have a reference to the government in it, by the way, I just want to add some, I think, what we'd all agree with, but someone who personally has worked in the Midland Temple Fields for over the last 40 years, and someone who trundles along on a push bike every single day to and from Temple Fields, I'm probably best placed to see the effects of some of the issues that this has caused, this permitted development, unintended consequences apparently. What you see in Temple Fields now is children playing 5-10 metres away from the middle of Edinburgh away, with the amount of heavy duty traffic travelling up and down. It's just not suitable, it's just not safe. What you see now is people hanging around outside the permitted developments in Temple Fields, and it's just becoming what should be, what Frederick Goodwood designed was industrial estates away from the community, away from residential housing, has turned into something as a real total mismatch. As the motion's already said, it has very serious consequences on the public services that this town is struggling hard to support. Health, police force, fire engines, education, very, very important services, putting unnecessary strain on all those services. As Councillor Ingle put in his motion, Temple Fields alone, as I know fully well, is poorly served by public transport and causes many, they're just not suitable places for permitted development. I understand, to be fair, with my housing background, some of the rationale behind the thinking. We do have a major issue in this country around homelessness. We do have a major issue in this country around trying to provide temporary accommodation. The answer is actually to provide more social housing in real communities. Communities that should be built around the people that live in them, not built in the middle of chimneys and juggling lorries. I'm not too convinced about the argument opposite that this was unintended consequences, because people voting in 2013 must have realised that putting the people in the middle of industrial estates is just simple madness, and I will support the motion.
Councillor Purton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I want to say that as the governor of a school, which is in my ward, Markham ward, and the fact that a large number of these
permitted developments are also in Markhall. I know exactly from first hand the problems that it's causing to local schools and other services. But I think to suggest, you know, as Mark's...
Councillors, can we please have one person
As
talking?
Mark's just hinted, to suggest that this was totally unseen, you know, could possibly be predicted, I would suggest it is not true. In fact, to suggest that it was only designed for the north, how often have we heard tourists talk about the north as if it's some, you know, wild land where strange things happen? The fact is that it was never going to happen up north because they've got plenty of cheap housing already. And the reason it was definitely going to happen in areas where there was not available cheap housing. Now, I've been told by Councillor Hazy from East Herts that she's discussed this personally with ministers and basically been told there's no way this policy is going to be changed because it ticks all the boxes as far as the government is concerned in getting people off the homelessness and housing list. That, if you like, it's seen in government as a positive thing, even though they accept the social consequences. I just also want to refer to the effect this is likely to have on our plans for the town centre. Because although obviously the most serious problems are caused to the individuals who are housed in these places, and you know, we've heard about the effect, the social consequences of community development of this sort. Perhaps not as important, but just as sure is going to happen is the effect it's going to have, and it's already having on the town centre. Our town centre action plan is supposed to be for like raising the profile of the town centre in preparation for a new role that it will play in all the people coming to work in our new plants and industries that are going to be set up in the town. And it's a place of entertainment and so on. But that relies on it having an attractive outlook. It relies on investment. And unfortunately, a side effect, not perhaps the most important effect, but a side effect of what's happening with Terminus House, Redstone House, is that it's not, if you like, the sort of thing that's going to encourage inward investment into our town centre. So there's that as well. As far as the Councillor Carter's point about high street conversions, I think he's basically clutching at straws there to try and explain this away. The fact is, the high street conversions that are being talked about are just expanding the opportunities for these landlords to exploit more people by turning shops into flats. Because there's lots of shops that are, as a result of forces which we're all aware, shops are closing and being left empty. The tourists see another opportunity where they can put people who can't afford proper housing into shops. That's what the high street conversions are all about. And unfortunately that might also apply to Harlow Town Centre as well, because high street is just another word for retail streets. I don't think it means, you know, something to do with gentrification. So I'm strongly support of this motion, and we need to get with other councils and actually force this issue up the political ladder, so it's something that the government can't ignore and has to turn away from what they regard as the beneficial effects.
Any more councillors before Councillor Strachan? No, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Well, most of the things I was going to say as I've been crossing off my speech here have already been said by everybody. Which is the shame going last. But I'm just going to go over what other people have said, really. I mean, since the GBDO was implemented, I don't necessarily think that actually it was thought out. I think a lot of it was unintended. It was just
cobbled together, and we've seen, what is it, the three rather large amendments since then to try and bring it back into some sort of order. But as I said, most people have already said what I was going to say, but I'll use some personal things. I spend most days going to Flex Meadow, and I go past Shield House every single day. Now, I look at that, and as many a time I've had to actually brake, like most people, because if you go outside, the kids are playing outside. It's a slope down, the balls fall down, and it was nice weather. They put a paddling pool outside. That's families. Now, I know that nobody in this chamber thinks that's suitable housing for a family. Nobody. So, yes, as Danny said, we need to ask other councils to, band together and start saying, let's look at this, let's revisit it, and actually, specifically around the B1 to C1, changes of uses. Quite simply, I can't see many councils, the real problem is especially in London, that are going to support this, because actually they're abusing the system, as we all know. And it isn't one particular political party who's running that council. Every single political party seems to be doing it if they can get away with it. But, so, I'll just finish up by saying I fully support this motion, and thank you very much.
Councillor Ingle, could you sum up now?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Carter's amendment, even though we didn't support it, is welcome, because it showed that both sides of this council recognise the pernicious effect this legislation is having, whether by design or by accident, on children and their families, vulnerable children and vulnerable families. So we welcome the support of the council's officers. The MP's letter that I referred to and have read lifted up almost in its entirety, as it was, from the scrutiny report, shows he read it and shows he shares our concerns about the effect that this ill-thought-out piece of legislation is having on our town centre and on our existing residents and the services that we provide them. I hope that now we've done the pantomime politics bit, we can come together with unanimity to support this motion, allowing this council to do all in its power to prevent...
The appointment of a member champion.
I move that we appoint Councillor Tony Durkin as a member champion for mental health.
Do we have a second for that? Okay. Right, okay. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we go on to item 11A to E, and we've got the supplementary document that you should have all seen for noting on this item.
Noted.
Okay, and item 12, that of urgent business, I have none, so we'll have refreshments back in the chair. Thank you very much, councillors, for attending.